Seated. God is good
all the time.
and all the time.
God is good.
Amen. So Hurricane Ian comes through Florida, up through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, up through Virginia, and it would be really just callous for everyone to ignore the loss of life and not to mourn the folks that have been really just hurt through all this. Just think of how many lives have been disrupted. I think I saw $40 billion in hurricane damage. Someone said on the news it was the worst storm in 200 years. I don't know how they keep track of all that. I don't really know. And of course, you always hope and pray that everyone takes shelter in the storm. I saw in the news one of the guys that passed away or died, however you want to say it, as the storm was building up steam, he decided to go out into his yard and drain his pool. And he just, I don't know if debris hit him or if he got blown away or whatever. Destructive, damaging, disrupts so many hundreds of people's lives. I mean, there's millions of people without electricity right now. It's just a bad situation. It's really hard to see that anything good comes from a hurricane. It really is. Unless you're a construction worker, right? Then you say, oh, but no, actually there's a lot that takes place that's actually beneficial during a hurricane. If you've ever been on the ocean during red tide, it's disgusting, it smells, it's nasty. Hurricanes are one of the #1 ways that red tides are cleared up. Hurricanes also get rid of a lot of the bacteria that builds up in the ocean that make it unhealthy for fish and humans. Hurricanes get rid of the algae that can come on the top. Hurricanes, when they come through, clear out the debris in forested areas that cause massive forest fires, and they actually spread a lot of the spores and the seeds, causing growth. But for us right here in Northeast Tennessee, I'm going to tell you something you don't know about hurricanes. If it were not for hurricanes, we would experience more drought. 1/6, almost 20% of our rainfall right here comes from hurricanes and tropical storms. There are places where tropical storms on the west, the only time they get rain, like the Baja Peninsula, is when there's a tropical storm or a hurricane. It's hard to see that good stuff comes through pain and destruction and catastrophe. But there are. There are things that are taking place that sometimes we do not understand. And again, nothing outweighs the loss of life, and I'm not taking any of that lightly. But there are times where, in the bigger picture, something good is happening that you can't see. Does life ever seem unfair to you? Talis, I bet when you fell off the ladder, you thought, man, this is unfair. Because I'm sure Cassidy said having to take care of you was unfair.
She was like, I get stuck with this instead of getting like an insurance payout or something.
Yeah. Life insurance, right? Sorry, Cass. The year's not over yet, right? There are times where life just seems really unfair. And whenever life is feeling unfair and the deck is stacked against you and you feel like a victim, it may not seem helpful at the time, but things can always be worse. You don't have to get on Facebook long to see somebody who has a loved one who's, dealing with some kind of disease or, Hurricane Ian, right? I mean, somebody is always dealing with something, and that just seems to be part of life. None of us seem to be immune from death and storms and violence. And the question isn't really, why is there so much violence? We should be asking the question, why isn't there more? Somehow, in God's sovereignty, he chooses at times to use catastrophe, to use destruction, to use devastation, and yet to limit it. Sometimes God uses force and war and disease to punish, to corral, to correct, to get our example, and he limits it. So here's a good biblical example for you. And I like Noah's flood. It's a great story. I love how we use it for children's nurseries and stuff like that. You know, the ark, and you're thinking, hey man, everyone was wiped out, right? But every once in a while, if I'm on a job site and someone's not working very hard, we're pumping concrete, I'll say, you know what? You need to pretend like you're the third monkey and the deck is going up, buddy, and the rain is coming. Let's go, moving along here, right? Noah's flood, pretty much universal, right? As far as we can tell. I mean, anywhere you go in the world, you can tell that the world has been covered with water, right? Universal disaster. Sodom and Gomorrah, one region. Limited. Control. Revelation, we're in chapter 6, and I would have to say, culturally speaking, the most recognized characters in all of the book of Revelation are probably the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It's in music, it's in literature, it's in poetry. You know, when things are going bad, you know, I know if you watch like any kind of like business program on the news and things start going bad in economics, then they'll use these guys as a metaphor. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then they'll list out, you know, all the political things and everything are bad, right? We use this very frequently, but how well do we know these four horrific horsemen? Chapter 6, verse 1, John says, now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals. And I heard one of the four living creatures say with a voice like thunder, authoritative, booming, attention-getting, powerful, come. Now remember, where is John? He has been caught up from the Isle of Patmos. He is in a heavenly vision. He is in the throne room, the 24 thrones around the throne, the Lamb, God himself on the throne, the four living creatures. And one of them says, come, and I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When the Lamb opens the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, come, and out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. So, first thing that we try to do when we read through these four horsemen is we try to say, who are these people, right? A lot of people through history have said, the first horseman, that's got to be Christ, right? I mean, there's such a imagery here, right? Here comes out white, purity, innocence, holiness, right? He comes out on this horse, and he's got a bow and a crown, right? So royalty, and he comes out conquering and to conquer. When you get over to chapter 19, you're going to see a similar image of Christ on a white horse conquering. I would submit this is not Christ. Remember, he's the Lamb who's opening the seals. Don't think it's Christ. I think it's false peace. Peace that's being conquered by the sword. Peace that's taking place. Remember, it's limited. It's controlled. God is over all of this. This is part of his plan. Instead of trying to guess who the horsemen are, and we've got to remember the genre of Revelation. It's apocalyptic. There's going to be imagery. There's going to be metaphor. There's going to be all kinds of fantastic, imaginative creatures in here. The question we should be asking is, how does God on his throne deal with sinful and rebellious humanity? Remember, the enemy in Revelation is the Roman Empire. John is a persecuted Christian. Chapter 1, verse 9. I, your brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation and in the kingdom. Don't lose track of that perspective. How does God deal with sinful and rebellious humanity? Obviously patiently, because we're still here, right? Otherwise he would have, when he wiped us out during Noah's flood, there would have been no Noah and the rest of the family to start over again. Obviously he is controlled. Obviously God is God, and he is on the throne. There are consequences to our choices. And if we're honest, if we're sincere, if we're going to be credible in communicating about the Christian faith, we need to acknowledge we don't understand how God operates. We don't understand fully, although he is revealing his plan, his methods are not easy to discern. Sodom and Gomorrah wiped out with fire. The flood wiped out all of humanity. How God balances all this out is, well, it's above our pay grade, honestly. And if we're going to be sincere, we acknowledge that. So John, looking at the four horsemen, he tells us there are bad situations, and they are on the way, but God is completely in control, and he is limiting and he is overseeing, and justice somehow is served through God's purpose. So the Lamb, the only one who is worthy in all of heaven, on the earth, under the earth, living, dead, all, he begins opening these seals, and we see the white horse. Then, of course, we'll see the red horse, the black horse, and the green horse. White probably does signify victory. Whoever this horseman is, whatever he is doing, he seems to be winning. Now, you got to think about Rome for a moment. Remember how I said, okay, hurricanes are bad, but there's good things that come from them? Rome built roads back then that are still usable today, right? It's amazing. The aqueducts that they built are still there. The Colosseum, where countless Christians were martyred, is still amazingly mostly intact. But what Rome brought that benefited you and I in this room today was what was called Roman peace. The world was at odds with itself. Everybody had all this infighting. When Rome conquered an area, they set up a garrison and they policed it, and prosperity took place. People had a good quality of life, but you didn't have all of this warfare. Roman peace enabled the spread of the Christian gospel in a way that it couldn't have 150 years before the Roman Empire. Rome is the enemy, but because of what they accomplished, good comes about. White probably does signify victory. Red, obviously, as we read through this, the red horseman is going to signify bloodshed. Black horse, scarcity. Things are bad, right? John's going to talk about it. If we think we're experiencing inflation now, John's going to talk about inflation here in just a moment. And then, of course, there is the pale horse, which signifies death. A good question, a worthwhile question to reflect on as you're reading through Revelation is this vision better experienced, allowing my imagination to kind of captivate me and look through it, or is it better off analyzed? Every word, every nuance, everything like that. And I'm not saying it has to be an either or, but I really believe that we get the impact of it more if we allow our minds to be open and try to visualize the way that John unveils this, instead of trying to understand each and every particular nuance. So the white and the red horse. Victory, right? He has the bow. The second one, come, and there's a bright red horse, and the rider's permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another. They're almost in contrast to each other. They're almost opposites of each other. The question that I think rises for me is, does God use warfare? Does God use violence? Does he control it, or does he just allow it because it's part of our free will? That's a question for you to ponder. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. I'd like to say here, oh yeah, I got it all figured out. Listen to me. I don't have it all figured out. And it's a mystery to me. Free will is the biggest mystery, probably. But how God chooses to oversee this. Again, is he using it? Is he limiting it, or just allowing it? The Roman Empire, between the years 68 and 69 AD, right? You've heard of Nero, you've heard of several of these emperors. In 1 year alone, from 68 to 69, Rome had 4 different emperors take charge. Now, think of how, I don't want to say upsetting it is, but just think of how disorienting it is for election time in America every 4 years, right? Everybody gets hyped up, the election happens, half the people are happy, half are upset, right? All that. Imagine in 1 year having 4 world rulers. Peace taken away. Some of those transitions of power were not very peaceful. Rome has civil war. They have conquerors. They have usurpers. They have bloodshed that comes in and takes place. Civil war, rebellion, disorder. What do these catastrophes really indicate? When you look at the guy with the white horse and you look at the guy with the red horse, and you look at victory and you look at bloodshed and you look at all this, what does it say about humanity? We gravitate towards violence very easily. I don't know, I've never been a traffic officer before, like Tallis and Kellen have been. But I don't understand why there isn't more road rage. Have you been down 11W lately? I mean, and wait till they open Chick-fil-A back up, right? We tend towards violence. What's his name? Michael Douglas. You know what he said his favorite movie was? Ever doing? Falling Up. Remember where he's got the ball bat and the crew cut? He's like the business guy, and he just goes in the restaurant and he just goes postal through the whole movie. Think of the popularity of movies like that, Pulp Fiction, superhero movies, right? We just kind of gravitate towards violence. Why? Because it seems like it gives us the solution. It seems like it's a quick fix. And that's the direction we tend to go. And I think sometimes God allows this. I think sometimes he limits it. And I think we see that in the text clearly. But then it gets a little more grim. So you start off with the white horse with victory. Then you got the bloodshed. And then we get the black horsemen. When he opened the 3rd seal, verse 5, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come!" And I looked, and behold, a black horse. And its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. In the text, this is the scales that they use in the markets. Legally acceptable scales, right? And he comes with these scales in his hands. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius." A denarius was a Roman silver coin that was worth 1 day's wage. A quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Barley, less substantial, less nutritious, easier to produce, right? It's a cheaper grade of food, right? So here, you go from lasagna to ramen, right? I mean, you go from good stuff to lesser good stuff, right? And do not harm the oil and the wine. Inflation. Historians say that this price is 10 to 12 times higher than what it normally was for a quart of wheat. They also tell us that a quart of wheat, you could feed yourself for a day's wage, but you wouldn't be able to feed your family. And in fact, you couldn't feed yourself very well. What do the scales indicate? Scarcity, right? But it's limited, it's controlled, because it says, do not harm the oil and the wine. In 92 AD, there was a famine. And the emperor says to the region where the 7 churches are, cut down half of your vines for your wine so that you can produce more wheat and barley and feed more people. When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, come! And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. The color here is actually the color of death. It's a color of green that is corpse. It was the word that they used to describe corpses in this day and age. Behold, a pale horse, and his rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. Historians are trying to hammer this out. Is this metaphorical? Hades is in the realm of the living dead. Is it supposed to be hell itself? Or the real word that John uses here for Hades is the name of the Greek god of the underworld, Hades. Death and Hades followed him, and they were given authority over the 4th of the earth. Again, limited in scope. Over the 4th of the earth, to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. John says, bad times are coming. Catastrophe is coming. The question for us, how do we deal? How do we cope? How do we handle times of scarcity? How do we handle times of catastrophe, right? John is saying a day's wage, insufficient. It's going to get bad. Things are coming. You can't take care of yourself, let alone your family. Is John trying to say this is what you can expect? Very clearly, this is coming. Was most of this in their lifetime? Probably. Do we see a deeper lesson that transcends their time into our time? Absolutely. Next week, we're going to get into more of the 7 seals. These are just the first 4. Suffice it to say, looking at the 4 horsemen, I think there's encouragement, because even in times of catastrophe, John is clearly communicating God knows what's going on. God is fully in control. And even though we may not understand it, it may be beyond our comprehension, John is communicating even when the situations are terrifying and devastation and catastrophe seem to be in control. The one who is in control is the Lamb, who John would remind us is the only one who is worthy.